They came for me at 9:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. I still remember the exact time because I had just poured my second cup of coffee, set my planner on the dining table, and opened my laptop to start the day's work. I was in my robe, slippers, hair tied back in a loose bun. I wasn't expecting a knock at the door. I certainly wasn't expecting two uniformed officers standing on my front porch, one with a warrant, the other holding handcuffs. "Rachel Moore," one of them asked, voice cold but formal. "Yes," I replied, blinking. The kind of blink your body does when your mind can't catch up. "You're under arrest for financial elder abuse and theft exceeding $25,000. I laughed, genuinely. I thought it was some prank or a mistake, but their faces didn't crack. One stepped inside while the other gently but firmly turned me around and began cuffing me. My neighbor, Mrs. Delaney, peeked through her curtain across the street. Her mouth hung open like a trout in church. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just asked, "Who said I did this?" And that's when they said it, my mother's name, Elaine Moore. I sat in the back of the police car, cuffed and stunned, as we drove through the town I'd lived in for nearly 3 decades, past the bakery where I ordered her birthday cake last year, past the pharmacy where I picked up her cholesterol meds, past the tiny bank branch where I had helped her set up autopay because she always forgot her passwords. And all I kept thinking was, she actually went through with it. Let me back up. My name is Rachel Moore. I'm 36 years old, a freelance accountant, and for most of my life I've been the quiet one in the family. I don't drink, don't party, and I never gave my mother any trouble growing up. I was the kid who cleaned her own room, helped with the groceries, and cried when my dad passed away of a stroke 13 years ago. Since then, Mom became my responsibility. She insisted she didn't need a retirement home or assisted care. She had me. I ran errands for her, balanced her checkbook, even paid her electric bill a few times when she forgot to. I'd drive across town twice a week just to sit with her and sort through unopened envelopes she swore were junk. She'd always say, "You're the only one I can trust with my finances, Rachel. You're not flashy like your brother." So when she asked me for help accessing her bank accounts online, I didn't hesitate. She gave me her login information willingly, even signed a notarized letter at my urging, authorizing me as a limited account manager for paying bills and viewing statements. That letter would save my life later. But at the time, I just thought, she's getting older. She needs support. I didn't see it coming. Not the mood swings, not the sudden temper, not the strange looks she started giving me when I'd ask her to confirm a transaction she didn't remember. And then the whispers started. 3 weeks before the arrest, I went to a Sunday brunch at my cousin Bree's place. The vibe was odd. People looked uncomfortable. Bree avoided eye contact. My Aunt Janice barely spoke to me. And my younger brother, Mark, who had always been somewhat distant, sat across from me, stiff as a board. When I asked what was wrong, Bree looked at me with pity and said quietly, "Rachel, is it true you've been using your mom's money for your business?" I dropped my fork. I didn't answer. I didn't even know how, because I thought, why would you even ask that unless someone planted it in your head? I left early that day, heart thudding so hard in my chest I could barely breathe. That night, I called my mom. She answered in the sweetest tone. "Hi, darling. Did you make it home safe?" I asked her calmly, "Did you tell people I'm stealing from you?" There was a pause, a long one. Then she replied, soft but dangerous, "I'm just telling them what I've observed." I felt manipulated lately, Rachel. I'm entitled to my truth. That phrase, my truth, should have told me everything. The day after the arrest, I was released on bail. My attorney, David Farron, met me at his office and said plainly, "Rachel, this is serious. If we don't have proof you didn't misuse her funds, the DA might push for trial." I remember nodding numbly. My career, my family, my reputation. It was all hanging by a thread. And my mother, my own mother, had cried in front of officers, accusing me of being unstable, emotionally abusive, and secretly draining her savings. I asked David one question. Can we prove she's lying? He looked at me and said, we'll need everything. Emails, texts, bank logs, and anything you remember her saying or doing that might prove this was calculated. So I began digging into her finances, her messages, her history of manipulation. I had no idea what I'd uncover, but I knew one thing. I was going to war. And this time, I wouldn't be the quiet one. You don't just wake up one morning and think your mother will destroy your life. It happens in slow motion, like water seeping through a cracked ceiling, quiet, almost unnoticeable, until your whole world is soaked and moldy before you even smell the damage. For me, it started the way so many betrayals do, with a favor. Years ago, shortly after my dad passed, my mom started struggling with things. Technology, paperwork, finances. She was proud but overwhelmed. That combination can be dangerous. She didn't want anyone in the family to think she was losing it. But she had a habit of forgetting to pay her property taxes, losing her debit card, and blaming her internet provider for stealing her money every time her account overdrafted. I was the only one who offered to help. And of course, she said yes. I created a simple spreadsheet for her, showed her how online banking worked, created strong passwords, even made a folder labeled Elaine's Bills on her laptop. She liked it. She praised me. You should have been a teacher, she said once, sipping tea. You explain things so gently. But the more she relied on me, the more I handled. Eventually, I was the one checking her balances, updating her bill pay, confirming her insurance premiums. I never touched her money for myself, not a cent. I didn't have to. I had my own clients, my own income. What I didn't have was foresight. I should have known dependency breeds resentment in people like her. Still, I kept showing up, kept helping, until the tone shifted. The first time she accused me, it was subtle. I had just paid her electric bill online. It was a bit higher than usual, probably because she insisted on using that ancient space heater in the living room all winter. She glanced at the statement and said with a frown, "Are you sure that's right? It feels inflated." "Yep," I replied calmly. I double-checked. "It's all in your usage. The bill has the breakdown." "Huh." She leaned back. "I don't know, Rachel. Sometimes I wonder if you're too comfortable with my accounts." I laughed, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. The second time was uglier. She called me, voice shaky. "Rachel, did you take out $500 from my account last Thursday?" "No," I said immediately. "Why would I? I didn't even log in that day." "Well, someone did." She was quiet, then added, "I've changed my passwords." Something inside me tensed. "Okay," I said carefully. "But just so you know, I haven't touched your money. I can help you report it if you think someone else got in, maybe your gardener or a scam call." "Oh, stop," she snapped. "I'm not senile." I went silent. She hung up. Later, I checked the account from the last shared backup I'd kept. I saw the withdrawal, made from a branch she frequented, with her signature. It was her. But now she had planted the seed, and she wasn't done watering it. The whispers started soon after. One Sunday after church, I noticed people pulling away as I walked past them. Mrs. Hartwell didn't hug me. Pastor Rick gave me a polite nod but didn't linger. The organist's wife, Deborah, turned and walked the other way. Something was off. That evening, I got a text from my cousin Bree. It read, "Hey, just checking in. Anna-Lane said some stuff today that didn't sit right with me. Do you need anything?" I called Bree immediately. She sounded unsure, like someone stepping around shattered glass. "She told us you were misusing her money," Bree said slowly, "that you've been moving funds for months. She said she confronted you and that you got aggressive." My hands were shaking. "I never touched her money," I said, voice breaking. "Everything I ever did for her was to help. She asked me." "I believe you," Bree whispered. "But Rachel," she cried, in front of the whole table. The next day I drove to her house. She opened the door like nothing was wrong. wearing that soft pink sweater I bought her last Christmas, with that grandmotherly smile she used on strangers. I stepped inside, heart pounding. "I want to talk about what you told the family," I said quietly. She blinked at me, eyes round. "What do you mean?" "You told them I've been stealing from you." She took a long breath, as if deciding how to spin the story. "I told them I've been concerned," she said, looking wounded. "You've had access to my money. There are discrepancies. I don't feel safe." "Safe?" I echoed, stunned. "What are you talking about? You gave me access. You literally signed a letter saying I could manage your bills." "That was before you started acting unstable." That word, unstable. It clanged in my head like a fire alarm. My own mother was building a case brick by brick in front of my face, and she was good at it. She had always known how to tell a story, especially if she was the victim in it. I looked at her. This woman who raised me, who cried at my college graduation, who held my hand when I lost my first client and said, "You're my pride, baby." Now she looked at me like I was a thief, like I was disposable. I walked out without another word. But I knew. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't aging. This was deliberate. And if she wanted a war, she was going to get one. The problem with being the quiet one in the family is that no one expects you to speak up, even when you're screaming inside. After that confrontation at my mother's house, things spiraled, faster than I thought possible. She didn't just tell people I stole from her. She told them I was dangerous, unstable, delusional, emotionally volatile. Words you don't associate with someone who has been folding your laundry for years, but when they come from a woman in her 70s, with a trembling voice and tears ready on cue, people listen. People believe her, especially in a town like ours. Quiet, close-knit. Everyone knows everyone, and no one wants to be the one that questions a poor, aging widow who just wants to feel safe. It started with my Aunt Janice. She called me out of the blue and left a voicemail. Her tone was clipped, almost scolding. "Rachel, I don't know what's going on with you and your mother, but she's terrified. I've never heard her like this. Whatever you're going through, please, get help." She didn't even ask for my side. That same week, I lost a client I'd worked with for over 2 years. No warning, just a short email. "Hi, Rachel. We've decided to go in a different direction. Thank you for your services." I didn't need to ask why. I saw the pattern. My mother was poisoning the well and doing it beautifully. But what hurt the most wasn't the town or the gossip. It was Mark, my brother. We were never best friends growing up. He was always Dad's favorite. I was Mom's little project. But we were still siblings, shared memories, snow days, secret Christmas presents. That kind of bond doesn't break easy, or so I thought. I texted him one night after I saw he had removed me from a group chat with our cousins. "Can we talk?" He replied 2 hours later. "I don't want to be in the middle." Just let Mom handle her money her way. No defense, no curiosity. Just a line in the sand. I sat on my couch that night, alone, the TV on mute, staring at my phone screen. This is how people lose everything, I thought. Not through violence, not through chaos, but through subtle, slow erasure. One rumor at a time. I could almost hear her voice in my head. She's always been intense. She hides it well, but she gets fixated, angry. I'm worried she'll snap. She didn't need to raise her voice. She just needed to plant the doubt and let it grow. But she had underestimated one thing. I'm not the same woman I was in my 20s. I may have spent most of my life trying to be a good daughter, but I am also a licensed accountant. I am patient. I know how to track a pattern, and I knew deep down if I followed the numbers, really followed them, I'd find the truth. So I did what she never expected. I went silent. I stopped arguing, stopped defending myself, and started building a file. The first thing I did was pull every digital copy of her bank transactions from the last year, the ones I still had access to before she changed her passwords. At first, it looked like noise, just typical spending. Utility bills, grocery store charges, pharmacy visits. But then I saw it. A series of ATM withdrawals. $400 here, $600 there. Always just under the daily limit. All from a branch 25 minutes outside of town. I remembered asking her once about one of those transactions. She said, "I needed cash to tip the house cleaner." But she didn't have a house cleaner, and she hadn't left the house that week. I marked them all. Then I found something even more suspicious, an overdraft fee that triggered a cascading set of penalties. She told the bank someone must have stolen from her. That was around the same time she first accused me of taking money. But the transaction that triggered it? A $900 check written out to EM Consulting with handwriting that looked like mine, but wasn't. I froze. She was trying to forge my name, or at least create the illusion that I was embezzling through a fake business. I called David, my attorney, and told him everything I'd found so far. He said, "If she's creating paper trails to make it look like you've stolen, that's not just slander. That's fraud. And if she involved law enforcement knowing it was a lie, she's in real trouble." "But who's going to believe me over a crying 73-year-old widow?" I asked. David was quiet for a beat, then said, "That's why we'll need more. You're going to have to dig deeper. Messages, calls, anything that shows she was in control, and weaponizing that control." That night, I sat on my bedroom floor with 2 boxes of old receipts, printed statements, birthday cards, and flash drives I had saved over the years. I wasn't looking for revenge. I wasn't even angry yet. What I wanted was clarity, a record, proof that I hadn't just imagined all of this, that I wasn't going crazy. Because when your own mother tells the world you're unstable, you start to doubt everything. You start to ask yourself, what if she's right? But then I found it. A voicemail from 6 months earlier. Her voice, cheery and bright. "Thanks for transferring the rent again, sweetie. You always take care of me. I'd be lost without you." I played it 5 times. Then I saved it, labeled it Exhibit A. The morning they arrested me wasn't the worst part. It was what came after. What happened when the front door closed behind me, the cruiser drove away, and the silence settled in like ash. I'd never seen the inside of a police station from the other side of the desk. Booking is humiliating in a quiet, soul-crushing way. You don't realize how stripped down you become. Your name turned into a case number, your history shrunk into a 1-sentence accusation. I kept hearing it over and over. Accused of financial elder abuse, over $25,000. The officer who processed me didn't look cruel. If anything, he looked disappointed, like he'd read the report and believed it. My own mother's handwritten statement was attached to it, along with bank printouts and screenshots she'd supplied. She said I'd been logging into her accounts and stealing, that I'd yelled at her when she confronted me, that she was afraid of me. Afraid. By the time I was released on bail, news had already traveled. Small towns don't need newspapers. They have church groups and grocery clerks. People stared when I stopped by the store for milk the next morning. Not a single word was said, but every aisle I turned down was empty within seconds. And when I got home, a letter from my part-time bookkeeping client sat waiting on the kitchen counter. They were reevaluating roles. It was a polite way of saying, "We can't afford to be associated with you." I called David that afternoon. He met me at his firm's small office on Ashford Street, the kind with warm lamps and cold coffee. David Farron had always been the kind of man who never rushed his words. But this time, he didn't even sit down before saying, "This is a mess, but not unfixable." He slid a folder toward me. Inside were copies of the police report, my mother's full written statement, and a preliminary court date, 2 weeks from now. "She's building a narrative," he said, pointing to the highlighted phrases. "Manipulative, volatile, emotionally unstable. She's not just accusing you of theft, she's trying to frame you as a danger." "To her?" I asked bitterly. "To her money," he replied. I sat there for a long moment, silent. Then I told him everything I'd started collecting. The ATM logs, the overdraft timeline, the voicemail recordings, the check with forged handwriting. David's eyes sharpened. That voice memo alone contradicts her entire testimony. She knew what she was doing, I said softly. She was smiling when she told me she changed her passwords, like she was daring me to react. David looked me straight in the eye and said, "Then it's time we stop reacting and start proving." That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed up compiling everything: bank logs, copies of every email I'd sent her regarding her finances, photos of her handwritten notes thanking me for taking care of her budget, even screenshots of our text messages where she asked me to move money or pay her bills. I labeled each file, dated each one, and then I opened the last thing I had, a shared Dropbox folder we used years ago to upload receipts and scans. I had forgotten all about it. Inside, I found something I didn't expect, an audio file labeled Elaine Memo 2. I clicked play. It started mid-sentence, like she had accidentally recorded herself. Just need her to react. Once she snaps, they'll all see it. Then no one will question the money. My heart stopped. I rewound it, played it again. There it was. Not just a lie, but proof of intention. She was baiting me, hoping I'd break, maybe yell, maybe get angry enough to justify calling the cops. But I never did. I had shut down instead, gone quiet, and that silence had become her problem. I sent the file to David that night. He called back 10 minutes later. "This changes everything," he said. We now had not just contradictions, but manipulation. She wasn't a confused elderly woman making a mistake. She was someone weaponizing trust, orchestrating a smear campaign with full knowledge of what she was doing. David filed a motion to subpoena the full server logs from her bank. We also submitted the voice memos and the forged check as preliminary defense exhibits. "She'll be blindsided," he said. "She blindsided me first," I replied. The hardest part of those days wasn't the legal battle. It was the isolation. No one called, no one visited. My inbox stayed empty. Even Bree, who once said she believed me, hadn't texted back in days. I became invisible. But I wasn't idle. I watched. I listened. I prepared. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to win her love or her favor. I was trying to win the truth. And I was finally ready to show the world what kind of mother Elaine Moore really was. In every story about betrayal, there comes a point where you realize no one's coming to save you. Not your family, not your friends, not even the people who once said they'd always have your back. That moment came for me on a Wednesday afternoon, 3 days after the bail hearing. I had just returned from David's office when I checked my mailbox and found an invitation. My cousin Heather's baby shower. I opened it and blinked. It was addressed only to Rachel Moore. Guest, no +1 allowed. Inside there was a sticky note. In Heather's handwriting, "Please don't bring drama. Mom says things are still weird with your situation. Hope you understand." I stared at it for a long time. Then I folded it in half, walked it over to the trash can, and dropped it in without a word. The people who once knew me as kind, reliable, steady, they were gone. Or maybe they had just shown who they'd always been, and I got it to a point. People are terrified of conflict, especially when it's within a family. They'll believe the easiest version of a story, the one that comes with tears and a trembling voice and a narrative that says, "I'm just a poor old woman, I'm scared." What they didn't want to believe was that sometimes monsters come wrapped in knitted cardigans and church perfume. My mother was winning because no one questioned the image, and I stopped trying to convince them. Instead, I got to work. I knew my mother wasn't careless. She was calculated. If she was going to accuse me of stealing, she would have made sure her story had layers, just enough inconsistencies to make the truth hard to find. But I knew her patterns. I knew her tells. She always underestimated technology. One night, I remembered something important. Last year, I had set up her online bank account with 2-step authentication. That meant every time she logged in, she received a text confirmation. And since we shared the same family plan under my name, I had records, through my mobile carrier, of when she was accessing the site. I pulled the mobile log history, dozens of login verifications, all at odd hours. Midnight, 2:38 a.m., 4:05 a.m. Why would someone who claimed to be locked out of her own accounts be accessing them in secret after cutting off my permissions? I compiled the data. Then I checked her social media. Her posts were still public. Just 2 weeks before the accusations, she had posted a picture of herself at a spa retreat captioned, "Self-Care Sunday. Thank you to my sweet girl for the treat." I remembered that day. I had sent her a $200 Venmo transfer with a note that said, "Use this on yourself for once." Now she was pretending I had stolen from her. I took screenshots, archived everything, and then I went back further, years, to every receipt I had ever covered, every utility bill I had paid with my own card. Every time she said, "Don't tell your brother I'm behind on the mortgage again," I laid it all out on a table, literally. Rows and rows of printouts, color-coded with sticky tabs, notes beside them in pen. It looked like a murder board. But I wasn't investigating a death. I was documenting a pattern of deception. David came by one afternoon to review the files. He stood in my kitchen, silent, flipping through everything. After about 30 minutes, he said, "This is exactly what we needed. You've done half the prosecution's job already, just in reverse." I asked, "Do you think the judge will see it?" He nodded. "Yes. And more importantly, it's going to raise serious questions about your mother's credibility." That night, I let myself cry. Not because I was scared, not because I was overwhelmed, but because I finally realized something I hadn't let myself say out loud. My mother didn't love me. Not really. Not unconditionally. She loved control. She loved appearances. She loved being the victim. And when I stopped playing the role of the obedient, guilt-driven daughter, she rewrote the story and cast me as the villain. I started therapy again that week. Not for her, for me. Dr. Lennox listened without judgment as I told her the entire story. She didn't interrupt, just nodded. When I finally finished, she leaned forward and said, "You're not unstable, Rachel. You're heartbroken." I didn't respond. I just exhaled, like I'd been holding my breath for months, because she was right. This wasn't about money. This wasn't about a courtroom. This was about years of emotional abuse finally being pulled into the light. In one of our old photo albums, there's a picture of me at age 7, holding up a handmade Mother's Day card. I'm grinning so wide, missing teeth. She's behind me, hands on my shoulders. I found that photo last week, and for the first time ever, I put it away. Because I finally understood that little girl deserved better. And I was done protecting the woman who hurt her. David always had a calm voice, the kind you wanted during emergencies, earthquakes, or messy divorces. But when I sent him the last set of files, the voice memos, the mobile login logs, the spa retreat post, and the check that mimicked my handwriting, his tone changed, just slightly, tighter, sharper. He called me that evening. "I just finished reviewing everything," he said. "This changes everything." He didn't have to explain what he meant. I could hear it in the way he drew his breath before speaking again. "Rachel, your mother didn't just make a false accusation," he continued. "She built a false narrative, with intent, with documentation. She didn't stumble into this. She created it." I remember gripping the edge of my desk so hard my knuckles went white. "So what happens now?" I asked. "We counterfile," he said. That same week, David submitted a formal motion to the court, a request for full access to Elaine Moore's bank activity, including security camera footage from any in-person withdrawals, a motion to admit new evidence, the voice memos, the metadata from her social media post, and the forged check with handwriting analysis pending. He also filed a subpoena for her cell phone records. If granted, we'd be able to prove she had accessed her accounts after cutting me off and contradict her sworn statements about being locked out. But the biggest bombshell? David had a handwriting expert compare the forged check with old letters I had kept from my mother, birthday cards, notes she'd written on grocery lists, Post-its she'd stuck to my fridge. His conclusion was damning. The check in question bears significant markers consistent with the plaintiff's handwriting, namely the loop patterns in the lowercase e, the upward slant at the end of sentence strokes, and the unique spacing between numbers. In simple terms, she had faked it. We met in person to prep for the hearing. David spread the documents across his conference table and tapped one specific page, the withdrawal slip signed by Elaine Moore at a physical branch, dated 3 days after she accused me of taking that exact amount online. "There's a camera at that ATM," he said. "We've already requested the footage." I stared at the grainy copy of her signature. My name was nowhere near it. David leaned back, folding his arms. "Do you know what this looks like, Rachel?" "A setup," I said. He nodded. "A carefully staged one. And now we're unraveling it thread by thread." As we got closer to the court date, things changed in the town, too. Not publicly, no one said anything outright, but I noticed fewer people turning their backs. Bree started texting again, short check-ins. Even Mark sent a tentative message. "Mom seems stressed. Says she's overwhelmed. Just checking in. You okay?" I didn't answer right away. I didn't know what to say to someone who left me hanging in the storm, only to knock when the sky started to clear. But I wasn't bitter. I was focused. Meanwhile, my mother was unraveling. I heard from an old neighbor that she'd been seen crying outside her car in the church parking lot. Her stories were getting inconsistent. She told one friend I'd stolen cash from her purse, told another I had threatened to erase her accounts. Neither were true. Neither had any proof. David and I decided to stay quiet. No rebuttals, no interviews, no dramatic gestures, just facts. "People will believe what they want," he said, "but a judge believes evidence." The day before the hearing, I received a package. No return address. Inside was a small envelope with no note, just an old key. I recognized it immediately. It was the key to my childhood bedroom, the one my mom had removed from the door the day I left for college. A twisted peace offering? A threat? I didn't know, but I held it in my hand, stared at it for a long time, then dropped it into a drawer and closed it without a word. She may have been my mother, but that house hadn't felt like home in a long time. That night, I prepared my statement, not because I had to testify, David would handle the legal firepower, but because I needed to remind myself of who I was. I wasn't the unstable daughter. I wasn't the thief. I wasn't the liar. I was the one who paid the bills when she couldn't, the one who canceled vacations to drive her to appointments, the one who once sat outside her house for 3 hours with soup when she had the flu and wouldn't answer the door. I had spent decades trying to earn love from someone who viewed affection as currency, and when I stopped paying, she tried to bankrupt me. But she failed, because I had something she didn't, the truth, and the receipts to prove it. The courthouse smelled like lemon cleaner and stale air. I hadn't been in one since traffic court a decade ago, and now I was the headline of a case I never asked to star in. When I arrived that morning, I felt hollowed out, but oddly calm, like a woman walking into her own funeral, knowing full well she might outlive everyone in the room. David stood beside me as we entered. His briefcase was packed tight with color-coded folders. "Remember," he said gently, "this hearing isn't about feelings. It's about facts. We let her perform, and then we unravel it." I nodded, jaw clenched. Elaine Moore entered the courtroom in soft lavender, clutching tissues, her eyes already glassy. She wore her favorite pearl earrings, the ones she only wore when she wanted to be seen as delicate. Helpless. She didn't even glance my way. Mark was there too, sitting beside her. He looked uncomfortable, shoulders stiff, jaw tight. He didn't meet my gaze either. The judge, a middle-aged woman with a no-nonsense voice, called the hearing to order. And then the show began. Her attorney opened with theatrics. Ms. Moore is a trusting mother, Your Honor. She only sought support from her daughter and in return was manipulated, financially exploited, and emotionally harassed. She comes to this courtroom not seeking revenge, but relief. I almost laughed. Elaine took the stand. She began with a tremble in her voice. She used my accounts without my permission. I just didn't know how to say no. She's always had moods, she said, reaching for a tissue. Then came the waterworks, perfectly timed, shaking hands, deep sighs. She recounted a version of reality where I had threatened her, demanded control of her accounts, and disappeared money she couldn't explain. I loved her, she whispered, but I feared her too. Gasps in the courtroom. A whisper from someone in the back. I didn't flinch. When David stood up, he didn't start with questions. He started with silence. Then, calmly, he said, "Ms. Moore, are you aware that your social media profile is public?" Elaine blinked, caught off guard. "Excuse me?" David walked toward the bench, held up an enlarged printout of her spa photo. "This was posted by you 2 weeks before you filed your police report. You thanked your daughter for the money, is that correct?" She squinted at the image. That was a misunderstanding. I didn't mean her. And the Venmo transaction linked to that day, labeled from Ms. Moore to you. Does that count as a misunderstanding too? Her mouth opened. No sound came out. Then he played the first voice memo. "Thanks for transferring the rent again, sweetie. You always take care of me. I'd be lost without you." Elaine's expression twisted. The courtroom, which had leaned in so sympathetically just minutes ago, began to shift in energy. I saw someone in the second row whisper to the person beside them. Then David pulled out the forged check and the handwriting analysis. "And this check, Ms. Moore. Do you recognize it?" She stared at it. "Your signature appears to match," he said, pointing to the analysis. "But the account number and payee information are tied to a business that does not exist. We traced it. The funds were cashed by you and deposited into your own savings account." Her face changed then. Gone was the shaking, tearful widow. Now her eyes narrowed. "I don't recall," she said sharply. David didn't blink. "Then let's move to the bank withdrawals. 8 of them, over $400 each, all made in person, at a branch 25 miles away from your home. You claimed in your statement that Rachel accessed your funds remotely. These were pulled with your card. And here," he turned to the bailiff, who handed a USB stick to the judge, "is security footage, time-stamped, showing you making those withdrawals." The silence that followed was brutal. Elaine's attorney shifted uncomfortably, muttering something under his breath. Elaine fumbled with her tissue. David approached the bench one last time. "And finally, Your Honor, we'd like to admit this voice recording, found in a shared digital folder, automatically backed up from the plaintiff's device." He clicked play. "Just need her to react. Once she snaps, they'll all see it. Then no one will question the money." I watched her face as the words filled the room. She froze. The performance ended there. The judge held up a hand. "I've heard enough for today. I need time to review the evidence in full." Elaine's lawyer stood quickly, trying to object, but the judge waved him off. "Ms. Moore, you may step down." Elaine looked dazed. She glanced at Mark, who now looked horrified. She opened her mouth like she wanted to explain, but nothing came out. She sat beside him, pale and silent. I didn't look at her. I didn't need to, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to prove I was good. I wasn't begging to be believed. I had spoken with truth, not tears. And the room had finally heard me. The courtroom buzzed after that day, not publicly, no reporters or headlines, but through whispers, through long pauses in grocery aisles, through the uncomfortable stares of neighbors who once looked away and now didn't know where to look, For days, I didn't hear from Mark. I figured he was still processing what he had seen, what he had sat beside. I didn't wait on his apology. I wasn't that woman anymore. David and I went back to work, because while Elaine had cracked under pressure, the case wasn't over. Not yet. The judge had paused proceedings to review evidence, but we needed to press forward with precision. That's when David received it. The final piece. It was a copy of the security footage from the bank. We had been waiting on it for a week, the bank delaying it for privacy verification. But once we had it, it was over. The footage showed Elaine Moore in her lavender coat withdrawing cash from the teller window, alone, smiling, making conversation, no sign of distress, no mention of theft. David pulled still images from the footage, time-stamped, down to the minute she claimed I had logged into her account and emptied it. She'd done it herself, with a freshly printed withdrawal slip. And her own ID. We paired it with the phone metadata, the two-step verification codes received on her phone during those withdrawals. And then, the final blow, an email we recovered from her Gmail account. She'd once asked me to help her reset it and had never changed the recovery info. It was a draft she never sent, dated a week before her police report titled, "Rachel, the story I'll tell." Inside it read, "If I do this right, they'll pity me. She always had a temper anyway. I just need to be convincing. The tears will come." David stared at the screen for a long time before saying, "We're no longer talking defense. We're talking prosecution." He sent the file to the DA. 3 days later, we received a call. They were opening an investigation into Elaine Moore for fraud, perjury, filing a false police report, and attempted financial entrapment. It was almost surreal. All this time, I thought I was just trying to clear my name. I never imagined the day would come when someone else would see what I had lived through. That my mother, charming, generous, victimized Elaine, might actually face consequences. But here we were, and she had no idea it was coming. The next time I saw Mark, it wasn't in court. It was on my front porch. He stood there in jeans and a wrinkled flannel shirt, holding a takeout bag and looking like he hadn't slept in days. "I brought Ty," he said awkwardly. "Thought maybe you'd still like Pad C UW." I didn't say anything at first, just stepped aside. We sat at the kitchen table in silence, chewing slowly. Neither of us touched the spring rolls. Finally, he spoke. I don't know what to say. I believed her. I didn't even question it. "I know," I said. My voice didn't carry anger, just resignation. "I feel like I failed you," he added. I looked up. "You didn't fail me. You just chose the story that made sense to you." He nodded, swallowing hard. "She's not well, Rachel. Mentally, emotionally. I think she's been spiraling since Dad passed." I didn't reply, because maybe that was true. But grief doesn't give you a license to ruin your daughter's life. A week after the DA launched the investigation, I got the letter, official, stamped. Elaine Moore was being charged with filing a false police report, attempted fraud over $10,000, intentional misrepresentation during a legal proceeding, obstruction of justice. A hearing was scheduled. She would be arraigned within 10 business days. David and I sat in stunned silence. "Do you want to attend?" he asked. "Yes," I said instantly. I expected anger, regret, vindication. But when the day came and she stood before the judge, flanked by her own attorney in a gray suit, I felt none of those things. I felt peace. She wore another soft-colored cardigan, no pearls this time, no makeup. She looked tired, small, like the performance had drained her dry. She pled, not guilty, of course, but the evidence was overwhelming. As she turned to leave the courtroom, her eyes met mine. She blinked slowly, as if realizing for the first time I hadn't disappeared, that I wasn't ruined, that I was still there, watching. I didn't wave, didn't glare. I just sat, unmoved, because now the weight was on her shoulders. For once, She was the one explaining herself. For once, I was the one people believed. 2 weeks after that courtroom silence, I got the call I didn't expect to come so soon. It was from David. His voice was calm but edged with something like finality. "It's happening today," he said. "They're serving the warrant." For a moment I didn't move. The words hung in the air. After everything, the lies, the arrests, the sleepless nights, this was the moment, the reversal, the end of the performance. "They're arresting her?" I asked. "They are," he confirmed. "Officially, it'll be public. She's being charged at the station downtown." I whispered, "Good." I didn't go to the station that day. I didn't want to see her in cuffs. I didn't need that image to validate my pain. But the world saw it. News travels fast in small towns, especially when the woman being handcuffed is Elaine Moore, the former church treasurer, community quilting queen, and widow saint who claimed her daughter ruined her life. The arrest happened outside her weekly church committee meeting, mid-morning. She was dressed in a pale blue blouse, smiling as she handed out flyers, until the officers approached. They asked her name. She didn't deny it. When they told her she was under arrest, the smile froze on her face. One officer gently took her arm. The other explained the charges. Neighbors later told me she looked confused, then shocked, then furious. She asked, "Who did this to me?" loud enough for several witnesses to hear. And when no one answered, she repeated it, voice rising. But this time, no one came to her rescue. Not the pastor, not the choir ladies, not even the church secretary she used to bake banana bread for. No one moved, because they had all heard what came out in court, and now they couldn't pretend not to know. Later that evening, I sat in my backyard under the fading sun, sipping tea, when Mark called. "She was booked an hour ago," he said. "Mugshot and all. I didn't know what to say to her." "You don't have to say anything," I replied. There was a pause. "I feel like this should feel satisfying, but it doesn't." "It's not supposed to," I said. "Justice and revenge aren't the same thing." Another silence. "I still don't know why she did it." I exhaled, because I stopped playing along, and she couldn't control that. The next morning, I got an email from the district attorney's office. Subject line: Victim Notification, Case 3451-Moore. Inside was a short statement. "Dear Ms. Moore, this is to inform you that the defendant in your case was formally charged and is now awaiting trial. We will keep you updated on all court proceedings. Please do not hesitate to reach out if you require any assistance during this process." I stared at it for a long time. Victim. It still felt foreign, like a coat I hadn't yet grown into. Because for so long, I had been made to believe I was the problem. I was the aggressor. I was the unstable one. Now the legal system was using words like plaintiff, survivor, primary witness. It was vindication, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like truth, finally, brutally acknowledged. A few days later, Mark and I met for coffee. He looked different, older somehow, more tired, as if the weight of our mother's unraveling had settled on his shoulders like dust he couldn't shake off. "She wants to talk to you," he said quietly. "Why?" "She says she has things to explain, things she regrets." I stirred my coffee slowly. "I don't need her explanations," I said. He looked down. "Are you sure?" "Yes, because the only thing I wanted for years was her honesty, and when I finally got it, it was a lie wrapped in a lawsuit. I didn't visit her in custody, but I did receive a letter. Unopened, it sat on my kitchen counter for days. Cream envelope, her neat cursive. No return address. I turned it over once, twice, held it in my hand, and then, without a word, I took it out to the backyard, lit a match, watched the flames dance across the page. She had said enough, and I had finally learned when to stop listening. In her arraignment hearing, she pled guilty to 2 charges, one for falsifying financial records and one for filing a false police report. In exchange, she received a reduced sentence, 2 years probation, community service, and full restitution of legal fees paid to me. She also lost her position at the church. Her name was removed from the volunteer board. The quilting group disbanded for a while. Her image had cracked, and everyone had seen what lay beneath. When the judge read the sentence aloud, I was in the front row. I didn't gloat. I didn't cry. I just sat, calm, upright, watching the woman who once held my face in her hands and called me her perfect girl, now unable to look me in the eyes. And in that moment, I wasn't her daughter. I wasn't her caretaker. I wasn't her scapegoat. I was her mirror. And all she saw was everything she tried to hide. After the court ruling, something strange began to happen. People started acting like it never happened. Not the arrest, not the trial, not the months of whispers, side-eyes, or being shut out of my own family's life. It was as if they were trying to fast forward through the aftermath, pretending the betrayal had been a misunderstanding, a blip, an unfortunate little family squabble better left behind. Bree invited me to lunch. My Aunt Janice called to check in as if she hadn't left a voicemail months ago accusing me of needing therapy. Even my neighbor, Mrs. Delaney, the one who had watched from her window as I was handcuffed on my porch, waved from across the lawn and offered me zucchini bread. Like zucchini could undo public humiliation. Like banana bread could erase trauma. Like politeness could substitute for apology. Mark tried in his own way. He started texting more regularly. He dropped off groceries once, unasked, but he never said the words. "I'm sorry I didn't believe you." He didn't have to. Not exactly, but there's a particular ache that lingers when someone who loves you remains silent during your worst season. That ache doesn't go away just because they show up later. It just dulls. Elaine never reached out again. Not after the letter I burned, not after the sentencing, but I heard things. Whispers in town, snippets through family, rumors that she'd started attending a different church, farther out. One where no one knew her history, no one would ask about me. She was rebuilding her image again. And honestly, let her. Because I had finally stopped trying to fix the narrative for her. What I did do was rebuild something else, myself. I took a break from freelance work and signed up for a small business program downtown, something I had dreamed of for years but always pushed aside in favor of errands, doctor's appointments, or emergency calls from my mother. I used the restitution money she was ordered to pay me to buy a new laptop, a decent printer, and set up an official LLC. I named my company More Clarity Consulting. A little dark humor never hurt. I helped women, mostly older, some younger, organize their financial lives. A lot of them had been burned before, by spouses, siblings, sometimes even their own children. And somehow they trusted me. Because I didn't judge. Because I knew. One afternoon, a woman named Teresa sat in front of me, hands shaking over a folder of bank statements. Her daughter had drained her savings through a joint account, and still she cried while defending her. "She's my baby," she said, voice cracking. "I know she hurt me, but she's still my baby." I didn't tell her to stop loving her child. I just told her the truth. You can love someone and still protect yourself from them. That's not betrayal. That's survival. She sobbed, and then she thanked me. And in her tears, I saw my reflection 5 months ago, and I realized I wasn't broken anymore. I was reclaimed. Some nights I still dream of my mother's house, the yellow kitchen walls, the hum of her old fridge, the dent in the hallway baseboard from when Mark crashed his tricycle. But in the dream, the doors are always locked, and I'm always outside, holding groceries, knocking. She never answers, and I never go back. One day, in early spring, I drove past that street for the first time since the arrest. I didn't mean to. I was on my way to a client meeting and took a wrong turn. There it was. The hydrangeas she loved were dead, the mailbox crooked, the porch swing hanging limp. It looked smaller than I remembered, sadder. Like even the house was tired of pretending. I didn't stop. I didn't even slow down. But I smiled a little as I passed it, not out of satisfaction, not out of spite, but because I no longer needed anything from that place. Not forgiveness, not recognition, not even closure. Everyone wanted to forget, but I refused. Because forgetting meant erasing the pain, and I didn't want to erase it. I wanted to honor it, because that pain shaped me. It carved out the weak parts. It stripped away the delusion. It left only the steel behind. That summer, I framed the most important document I've ever owned. Not a diploma, not a license, not my business certificate, but the court ruling. Dismissal of all charges. Rachel Moore. Plaintiff's case, deemed malicious and fraudulent in nature, full restitution ordered, record expunged. I didn't frame it for revenge, I framed it for memory, for the day I stopped shrinking to fit someone else's story, because I was no longer someone's scapegoat. I was no longer someone's unstable daughter. I was my own damn person, and I had the paper to prove it. Elaine Moore once believed that if she smiled hard enough, cried at just the right moments, and kept her sweaters pastel, the world would always see her as the delicate one, the victim, the good mother. Her image had been her fortress, and when it cracked, publicly, legally, permanently, it shattered everything she'd spent her life constructing. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I just watched it fall, brick by carefully painted brick. After her conviction, my mother disappeared from our family gatherings, church rosters, and local committees, slowly, like she had never really been there, like people had simply decided they'd misremembered her ever being so involved. She wasn't mentioned at Bree's baby shower. Her name wasn't on the sign-up list for the food drive. Even the senior bingo group quietly shifted venues, from the church rec hall where she used to host to the library annex. It wasn't dramatic, it was surgical. The way people in small towns erase you when you become inconvenient. And in that vacuum, something unexpected happened. People started asking me questions, quiet ones, whispered after meetings or at the coffee shop counter. A woman I didn't know approached me outside the grocery store and said, "I always had a funny feeling about her. I'm sorry no one said anything sooner." A man from our church murmured, "I thought you were guilty." I really did. But you handled it with so much grace. You proved everyone wrong. And one woman, someone I remembered from a church quilting circle, touched my arm and said, "Thank you for surviving what most women stay silent about their whole lives." I had spent years hiding in my mother's shadow, playing the role of the peacekeeper, the helper, the responsible daughter. But now I was something else. A woman who had walked through fire and come out not just alive, but sharp, clear, and unafraid. And the thing about fire is, it doesn't just burn the lies, it forges the truth. Elaine began her court-ordered community service a few months later. I didn't see it myself, but a friend of mine from downtown texted me a photo, blurry, taken from a distance. There she was, my mother, cleaning trash along the edge of the highway in a bright yellow vest, her hair pulled back, no pearls, no makeup, just a gloved hand holding a trash picker, face turned away from the camera. I stared at that image for a long time. She had spent her whole life carefully curating how people saw her, but there, in that moment, she looked small, not humbled, not transformed, just unmasked, and finally, real. Mark called me later that week. He had been stopping by occasionally, trying to reconnect in cautious, uneven steps. "She's not doing well," he said quietly. "She's angry. Says no one understands what she gave up for this family." I didn't respond right away. Then I asked, "Does she regret it?" Mark was silent then. "She regrets getting caught." It's strange, the way grief works when the person you're grieving is still alive. I wasn't mourning her arrest or the loss of our relationship. I was mourning the idea of a mother I had convinced myself existed. The one who made grilled cheese on rainy days, who brushed my hair when I had the flu, who left notes in my lunchbox when I had a test. But now, With distance, I saw the patterns. Those were moments, not love, gestures, not foundations. My mother loved the appearance of motherhood, not the work of it, not the selflessness of it, not me. People talk about moving on like it's some sort of clean break. Like one day, you just wake up, brush off the past and say, well, that's behind me. But I didn't move on. I moved through it, through the isolation, through the gaslighting, through the legal maze, through the humiliation of being publicly accused by someone who had rocked me to sleep as a child. And at the end of all that, I was still here, stronger, clearer, whole. I drove past the courthouse one day in mid-fall. Golden leaves littered the steps. A woman stood outside crying, holding a folder in her hands. Her posture was familiar, that quiet kind of devastation. I didn't stop, I didn't interfere, but I sent up a silent prayer that she had someone who believed her, that she kept her records, that she had a David of her own, because no one should have to fight their mother and the world to be heard. I went home that evening and opened my laptop. There, on the home page of More Clarity Consulting, I added one new line beneath my business tagline: financial order for women who've been dismissed, disbelieved, or betrayed. Because this wasn't just my story anymore. It was the story of so many women like me. Women who were told they were too emotional, too dramatic, too difficult. Women who were written out of their own family's narrative the second they stopped being useful. Women who are now rewriting themselves back in. And as for Elaine, I don't hate her. I don't need to, because hate is a tether. And I finally let go of every string she ever wrapped around me. She can keep her silence, her shame, her stories. I have mine now, and it's the only one I'll ever need. The last time I saw my mother was in a courtroom, not as the one making accusations, not as the tearful widow gripping a tissue, but as a woman standing alone at the defendant's table, shoulders stiff, voice low, expression hollow. Elaine Moore pled guilty that day. No theatrics, no story, no tears, just a quiet, bitter admission of what everyone now knew. She lied. About me, about the money, about the danger I supposedly posed. She didn't look at me once, but I looked at her. I sat in the front row, calm, spine straight, eyes steady, as the judge read out the charges. As the sentence was declared, as restitution was ordered, as her rights, her reputation, and her story crumbled in real time, I watched her break, not physically, emotionally, the way liars do when truth isn't just spoken, but legally affirmed. And for once, she couldn't interrupt, couldn't pivot, couldn't rewrite the ending, because this time, I had written it. When the bailiff escorted her out of the room, she hesitated at the exit, just for a moment. And in that moment, she turned slightly, just enough to glance back at the gallery. Our eyes met. There was no rage in hers, no apology either, only disbelief, as if she never thought it would come to this, as if deep down she still believed she could spin the world back in her favor. But not this time, because I wasn't just watching. I wasn't afraid anymore. After court, I walked outside into the sunlight. It was unseasonably warm for early winter, the kind of day that made the air feel forgiving, gentle, new. David walked beside me, briefcase in hand, offering a rare smile. "You did it," he said. "No," I replied. "We did it." He gave a small nod. "You going to celebrate?" "I already did," I said. "I got my name back." In the following weeks, life returned to something like peace. Not perfection, not fairy tale neatness, but quiet mornings with coffee and books. Clients who respected me. Friends who apologized and meant it. Even Mark, awkward but steady, visited more often. He helped install a new fence in my backyard one Saturday. We didn't talk about her. We didn't need to. Some gaps don't need to be filled, just acknowledged. One day, while organizing some old files, I found a letter I'd written years ago but never sent. It was to her. Written on a night I cried myself to sleep after she told me I never did enough. I almost threw it away, but instead I opened it, read it aloud, and then I burned it. Because that version of me, the one desperate to be seen, to be understood by a woman who built love like a ladder with missing rungs, she didn't exist anymore. She had grown up, and she no longer begged to be believed. I started speaking at small support groups after that. Women's shelters, financial abuse clinics, survivor circles, and every time I spoke, someone, somewhere in the room would start to cry. Silently, deeply, sometimes not even knowing why, because betrayal by a parent, it doesn't just wound, it warps, it confuses, it rewrites your identity, unless you claim it back. So that's what I did. Every time I told my story, I reclaimed a little more, and every time someone else said, "That happened to me too." I knew I wasn't just healing. I was helping others escape the same silence I had once suffocated in. I remember someone in the group once asked me, "If your mother walked into this room right now, what would you say to her?" And I answered honestly, "Nothing," because there's nothing left to say. She taught me who I don't want to be, and that lesson was more valuable than her apology ever would have been. So now, when I sit in my office, sunlight spilling across my desk, papers neatly filed, calendar full, I feel something I hadn't felt in years: peace. Not because everything was fixed, but because I stopped waiting for it to be. I stopped explaining myself, stopped shrinking, stopped carrying guilt that never belonged to me. I sat front row that day in court, and I watched the truth do what I never could: shatter the illusion. This story doesn't end with reconciliation, or a Hallmark hug, or a mother and daughter reunion in a warm kitchen. It ends here, with a woman who knows her worth, with a woman who was torn down, lied about, arrested, and humiliated, and who now sits in her own house, her own life, her own name, unshaken. Because when they tried to destroy me, they forgot something. I was built to rise. I don't think about her every day anymore. Some days pass and her name doesn't even cross my mind. Not when I'm walking to the farmer's market. Not when I'm updating a client's books. Not even when I pass that church and see the faded bulletin board where her name used to be listed under hospitality chair. Healing, it turns out, isn't a grand, cinematic moment. It's quiet, like one day you realize you're breathing easier, laughing louder, answering the phone without bracing yourself. I still keep the court file in a drawer, not because I need it, but because it reminds me how far I've come. From accused to advocate, from abandoned to anchored. Sometimes women write to me, strangers who saw my story shared through a local network or during one of my talks. They all say the same thing: no one believed me either. She turned everyone against me. I thought I was going crazy. And I write them back, every single one, because I know what it's like to scream the truth into a room full of people who already decided you're guilty. If you're listening to this and your betrayal hasn't made sense yet, if your abuser still wears a smile and you still lie awake replaying what you could have done differently, let me say it plainly. You are not broken. They just needed you to believe you were. My mother? She taught me a lot, not in the way she meant to. She taught me how dangerous silence can be, how powerful the truth becomes when you stop asking for permission to speak it, and how freedom doesn't always come with forgiveness. It sometimes comes with distance. She broke me first, but I healed, and when she shattered under the weight of her own lies, I didn't celebrate. I didn't speak. I just sat, front row, calm, unmoved, whole.